Happy, what's it, Thursday, 10 o'clock, and we have a special show. It's the Mina, Marco, and me show, except it's Marco and me, like in the old days, here on Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy on ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidel, and I have a wonderful time talking to Marco Mangelsdorf, who joins us by Skype audio from Provision Solar in Hilo. Welcome again to our incredible discussion opportunity, Marco.
Well, with an exuberant "What's up, Jay?" All the best from the beautiful South Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'm here for a couple weeks or so. I'm going to be attending the Intersolar Conference in beautiful downtown San Francisco next week. So that's why I'm here, and that's why you're there, and here we are together.
Okay, I just heard a story on NPR about San Francisco and about this incredible number of initiatives that are going to be put to the propositions that can be put to the people. And one of the underlying points of it, and I think was really a valid point for discussion about energy in Hawaii, is that with these initiatives and propositions, you have the people voting on everything, on the silliest things. And, I suppose you don't want the legislature to do everything in the world, but now the people do a lot of things, and there are lots of initiatives and propositions. And you wonder whether they're qualified. You wonder whether they're interested. You wonder whether they're educated and reading even the ballot. And that was the discussion. And it was, kind of a very salient point in our time. A representative government doesn't do it always right, but at least they have a chance to think about it. Regulators, can be slow and difficult, but in fact, they presumably have an obligation to analyze what's going on. If you put it to the masses, you get political and emotional decisions. What do you think about that?
Well, in fact, in the California State Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, there is the possibility, which is every 2 years, the possibility becomes reality where there is a referenda on the state ballot. And of course, a number of cities and counties have adopted that as well. So there's been discussion amongst political scientists for a number of years just to what extent how many referenda are too many, and is this somehow an abdication to some extent of the people's bodies, in this case the California State Assembly and California State Senate, they're somehow advocating their role, their function in terms of making decisions like this when the people are being called to make decisions. One of the big ones that's getting traction in terms of the press is that it looks like a referendum to put to California voters in November whether marijuana should be legalized and follow Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and there's one other state I always seem to forget. Is it Montana, I think? So there's going to be a number of important referenda on the California state ballot, and legalizing cannabis is going to be one of them. So yes, we're big time into participatory democracy in the Golden State.
Right, in the age of high technology. And there's another one I heard on this program, and it's the requirement that porn actors use condoms. That's a very noble idea, but gee whiz, want to have millions of people vote on that? Do they know? Is it important? Why doesn't the legislature handle this sort of thing? Is it an abdication? Is it a failure on the part of the existing system? Are people justified in disconnecting from the existing system? Those are all rhetorical questions. Why don't we move to the principal question? There's only one issue in Hawaii energy right now, and that's what the PUC is going to do. And I hope we have enough time here to explore all the angles and interstices of that. We're in a very strange situation now because Mike Champley's term ended, and although he could have held over, the governor appointed somebody else, and that person has not yet been qualified, so it's an issue as to whether Champley still sits somehow because his successor has not been, quote, qualified. Whatever qualified means, that could mean consent of the Senate, but it's not entirely clear. So there's a legal issue brewing, and some senators have made some noise about a lawsuit over that. And so then the PUC now is in a hot light itself. What do you think about that, Marco? Which way are we going to go on the PUC's authority to vote with a new commissioner?
Well, in the words of the late, great Jerry Garcia of Grateful Dead fame, channeled by none other than Thomas Gourock, the newest PUC commissioner, what a long, strange trip it has been, Jay. And Gourock actually used that exact phrase at the end of the first public hearings round, which was December 16th. I was in the room, and I have a lot of respect for Gourock's dry but quirky and fun sense of humor when he closed out that first round of hearings with the quote from Jerry Garcia. So, geez, where do we go from there? Last week was a big week in that on Wednesday, Governor David Egay announced that the chief counsel of the commission, Tom Gourock, was going to be taking his seat, so to speak, on Friday, as far as replacing Mike Champley, who had his last day on Thursday, and who essentially had his rights taken away in terms of being able to continue as a commissioner. So, as far as I know, it's business as usual on the commission with Chair Randy Iwase, Lorraine Akiba, and Tom Gourock, who are working hard, I'm sure, to try to get a decision out on the proposed merger between NextEra and HEI. So that's kind of where we're at now, and as far as I know, it is, like I said, business as usual there. And, if Champley was going to be replaced by anybody and not totally hiccup the process in terms of a delay by bringing someone in as the new commissioner who wasn't on board or hasn't been on board the train, so to speak, and having not had access to all the tens of thousands of pages of documents and public hearings records and internal deliberations. Gourock was a really great choice in that sense because Mr. Gourock has been in on the process from the get-go. He's really kind of the best choice.
I'm not comforted by that, Marco. Yes, it was a good choice to avoid the argument that David Egay was bringing in somebody to vote at the very last, in the 47th inning over here on a process that had been going on 18 months. And if he brought in Joe Dokes the ragman, who knew nothing about it, that would be subject to criticism. So to avoid that, clearly, smart move, he brought in somebody who'd been there, who'd been around. But I would offer you this thought, Marco. A staffer doesn't have the same access or mindset that a commissioner does. A commissioner has the mantle of, fiduciary obligation to the government and the people. He has his oath of office. When he looks at the facts and hears the testimony, it's a different mindset than when he's counsel or on the staff of the PUC. So although David Egay made a smart choice to avoid public criticism of this appointee as someone who was going to have to vote on something he didn't know about, fact is, he wasn't a commissioner. Champley was. Champley sat there all through it. Champley heard it and read it and is equally familiar as the other two commissioners. So I don't really buy that. I think the guy who sat there for 18 months should have a chance to vote on it. And clearly what happened is the governor withdrew that. He took Champley out before Champley could express himself. And it does ring of unfairness and manipulation. And there have been, rumors circulating that in fact they don't agree. In fact, they're not talking to each other. In fact, a written opinion, a draft opinion has been circulating. And it could be that draft opinion approves the NextEra deal. And it could be that Champley wants the NextEra deal and Randy Iwase doesn't. And maybe Lorraine Akiba wants it also. And it would have been a vote in favor had Champley stayed around. Have you heard any of that?
Yes, Jay, I have. I've heard that pitch or that speculation, and there's been a lot of speculation these past weeks and months, and I believe that there's been a draft order on the table since sometime in May. So it's been for the past 5, 6, 7 weeks that has been circulating at the commission. I take a little bit different view in terms of, from what I can tell and what I understand of the commission process. I believe Tom Gourock has been in on pretty much everything, if not everything, as far as the documentation, the evidence, the record, as much as the other three commissioners were in his position as chief counsel. And you can certainly debate and discuss the political aspects of what the governor did last week and the timing of when he did it. But as far as Gourock's capabilities and his qualifications, I've heard no criticism whatsoever regarding his ability to do what needs to be done at the commission. The debate, of course, has been principally as to whether the governor had the legal authority to do what he did, and he did the right thing in the sense that he went to the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Hawaii, Attorney General Douglas Chin.
Oh, there's no question he had a right to appoint somebody. The term has, expired. It's up to him to appoint. He could appoint now or he could wait. The problem, I think, legally, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, is the law, which I think you're familiar with, says that the successor, that Champley's term does not end until he's a holdover, until his successor is duly appointed and qualified. Qualified is a little ambiguous, but qualified, in my mind, means consented to by the Senate. The Senate's not happy with this. There may be serious problems about consent. In any event, it's between sessions. The Senate, is not likely to act between sessions, not without a special session, which isn't going to happen. And so, what you have is suspended animation. What now? What does this mean? Where do we go from here? Query, can this decision, whatever it is, be valid when one of the commissioners has ostensibly succeeded another one before being duly qualified?
Well, I'll go back again to Chin's letter, which you probably read as well, his advisory opinion to the governor. And he I don't have it right in front of my screen right now, but my recollection is that the Attorney General makes clear that he believes that the governor is within his right to do exactly what he did. Now, of course, that's what lawyers and courts are to decide sometimes when there is a dispute over the meaning of the word qualified. But, it is business as usual as far as I know at the commission right now. And as far as I know as well, there only have been 2 senators out of 25, 2 out of 25, who have spoken up publicly in the press. There's the Senate President Ron Kochi from Kauai and then Senator Ross Baker from Maui. And they have both expressed concerns about it, but they have not made clear that they're going to put forth any type of legal challenge. That said, I guess the news as of yesterday, because there's, as we both know, right, new news breaking every single day on this story, is that Ron Kochi has asked Attorney General Chin to essentially address a number of questions that Kochi had, about Chin's opinion to the governor. So, the game continues to play on, for sure. But in the meantime, the commission has to do what they need to do. And there's not just the merger, of course, which is center stage. It is center stage, but there's a whole slew of other really important stuff that affect my industry, my PV industry, our PV industry, and a number of other really important issues in the energy realm that the oxygen has kind of been sucked out of the room big time until this merger thing is decided. So, we collectively can't afford to have this drag on for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Well, it's been dragging on for 18 months. Just as you said, Marco, this has been overshadowing everything and slowing everything down for 18 months. And frankly, at the beginning of that 18 months, I think you and I spoke, and I said, and I will say again, why does it take 18 months? What is this about citizen democracy where everybody in the state has a chance to weigh in on this? I think we've wasted 18 months. Could have done it a lot quicker than that. Federal government on various agencies moves a lot quicker on that. So I agree with you. It sucked all the oxygen out from the beginning and for 18 months. And what this makes me feel, you know what it makes me feel, Marco? It makes me feel we need to take a break. We're going to take a short break. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, and we're discussing the biggest issue in energy for years and years and years, both past and future. That is the approval or disapproval of the NextEra deal. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen, host of Likeable Science here on ThinkTechHawaii.com. I hope you'll join me every Friday at 2 p.m. to discover what's likable about science.
Hi, my name is Justine Spiritu. This is my co-host Matthew Johnson. Every Thursday at 4 p.m. we host the Hawaii Food and Farmers Series. This is the place you can come to for insight on the perspective and history and passions of Hawaii's farmers and all folks involved in Hawaii's local food system. What kind of folks do we have on?
So we have everyone from local farmers, we have foodies, chefs, we also have journalists, researchers, anyone who's actually working to help make Hawaii's local food system that much better.
So join us every Thursday and tweet into us and ask us some questions and leave your comments as well.
And what are they smoking in there?
Okay. Marco and I disagree. He thinks that he's the first one to make a metaphor with the Pope, in the selection by the Vatican of the next Pope. And I feel that I was the first one, but hey, it's okay. It was, great minds, we both had the same thought at some point. And this is just like that. It's just like the Vatican, the inner secrets, the inner mechanisms by which all, Pope selection is governed are happening here. And gee whiz, it's going to be a real surprise one way or the other. I think, in fact, it'll be a surprise. It'll be a surprise that it happens soon. But you know what? Fact is, they said there was going to be a decision this week, and this week is almost over, Marco. Do you think there's going to be a decision this week?
Oh boy! Well, even one so much wiser than you and I, Jay, one Randy Iwase, was quoted, was it yesterday's Star Advertiser, saying, "Well, it's going to happen soon. I've been wrong before about particular day, time frames, because he first said end of June, beginning of July. Well, end of June has come and gone, and now we're on July. What's the date? July 7th. So, do I think it's going to come today? Possibly. Is it going to come tomorrow? Possibly. Well, if not today or tomorrow, then maybe next week."
Well, use the surprise test. It would not be a surprise if it happened today. It wouldn't fall down surprised. The same with tomorrow. On the other hand, we wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen today and didn't happen tomorrow. Matter of fact, we wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen for weeks. I mean, the thing hasn't really settled down yet. And let it not be said that the PUC moves with alacrity, especially when the stakes are high. So, it's their call. And I think people have gotten so used to waiting, it doesn't make that much difference anymore. We're all in a state of, a state of cloud state, And so,
Cloud state.
I would like to see it happen immediately because of what we talked about before, and that is, it puts may I say, a shadow or a cloud maybe, on everything in energy, not just this issue. Try to move ahead with that 100% goal. Mandate, and Louis Salaveria calls it a mandate. How can you do that when you can't really move ahead? Everyone from government to industry, is in the cloud here. So what's going to happen? Let me give you a differential, Marco. Suppose the deal is approved. What's going to happen?
Well, there are three possible scenarios. One is that it's approved without conditions. In other words, exactly as NextEra has proposed with those, what are we up to now, 95 so-called commitments, that it's approved without the requirement of without the Commission coming up with additional commitments. So that's one possibility. The second is that it's conditionally approved, right, which was the Commission coming up with 1 through X additional commitments that may come from what the consumer advocates suggested or any of the other interveners. So that's scenario number 2. Scenario number 3 would be that it is denied outright, either by a 2-1 or 3-0 vote. I think we can take scenario number 1 off the table. I don't believe it's in the realm of this world that the Commission would approve the deal as is.
Well, there would be a public outcry if that happened.
So then that leaves us with number 2 and number 3 in terms of conditionally approved or rejected outright. And I would think that there would be the desire. Now, whether this desire is fulfillable or not remains to be seen, but there would be the desire of having a unanimous vote, having it three votes in favor of going in the same direction, the same decision. And perhaps that's where the rub has been, as you kind of alluded to earlier in our conversation, that it's been speculated that Mike Champley and Lorena Keeban may be wanting to go in one direction, and Randy wanted to go in the other, and with the change from Champley to Gourock, that tangibly changes the whole decision. Well, I mean, we'll find out. We'll find out very soon, and then after that, if it's with conditions, or if it's an outright denial, then all eyes will be on NextEra, right? Because they've been in the game now for 2+ years, spent substantial amount of money to try to gain control of Hawaiian Electric Industries and take over, and then they'll likely probably sit on the decision for 24 to 48 hours, other than the perfunctory, yes, we got the decision and we're reviewing it, and then within 24 to 48 hours, they'll announce what their next course of action is going to be, whether it's we're done, we give it the best shot possible, and we'll go back to Juneau Beach, or on to trying to make plays on other distribution or generation companies on the mainland, or they will challenge. They can ask for a reconsideration of the decision, which I think is probably not in the cards, because to go to the same individuals who spend weeks and months deciding, and ask them to rethink their decision probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Then they would be left with the option to appeal to the intermediate court, if I understand the sequence properly, to appeal the decision. So
yeah, and one of the bases of, I mean, there's probably a number of appeal points out there. One of them could be that one of the commissioners is not qualified, just as we discussed. So, let me add some thoughts there. I agree that it's not likely that it'll be approved without conditions. But if there are conditions, of course, NextEra will have to respond to that. And I suppose the response could be all formal. And the way this whole proceeding has gone, it's all been, out in the open with all these hearings and hundreds of people attending. I mean, my goodness gracious. Blaisdell Auditorium for a regulatory hearing? My goodness. So, we have a culture, law of the case kind of thing, where if you want to make a decision, you have to hear everybody. And so it'll be hard to have, what is possible under the statute, like more private negotiation, or even a mediation, the appointment of a kind of a special master who would resolve any differences, which I think ought to be the way to go, instead of doing every stroke in public, with all the interveners, sitting there commenting. That'll take another 18 months if we do that. So that's a problem with dealing with conditions that are different than the ones that were talked about before and proposed by NextEra. The other thing is, they could say, we disagree with this in general, and we're going to take it up. Point about the Senate doesn't file lawsuits. I can't remember the Senate doing that. They'd have to be, I don't think it's possible as the Senate. But they're individuals, and this is the primary party. This is NextEra. If there's anybody aggrieved by a bad decision, it would be NextEra. And the question to me is whether NextEra wishes to do that, because that will also take a long time. Before that suit is resolved, it'll be 18 months plus. It's hard to say that this could ever end quickly. So in the absence of an outright approval, or in the absence of a disapproval where NextEra walks away, the thing to get resolved would take forever. And it reminds me of TMT. I mean, foreign investment comes to town, and this is the way we manage it. We make them wait 18 months, and then we give them, at the end of 18 months, we give them an impossible set of choices by way of conditions. And, there's a fair chance they will walk away. And that's sad, not only because this deal couldn't happen, or anything like it, but because we spent all the time on hold, and because we sent a message, yet another message to Wall Street, saying don't put your capital in Hawaii, you'll hate it. And without capital from offshore, we can't form the businesses to make headway in the 21st century. We can't establish new industries. We can't offer jobs. And those kids will be flying out on airplanes right after they graduate. That's why we need capital. That's why we can't afford to send bad messages to Wall Street. This has been an awful message so far, and it could get worse.
No, I hear what you're saying, Jay, and at the same time, the rumor mill, which has got various rumors in play these days and has had for months, if NextEra were to walk away or be sent away, there are supposedly more than one entities, whether it's the latest buzz as of the past week or so, Warren Buffett, because his company Berkshire Hathaway, I mean they're in the energy business on the mainland. So whether it's a Warren Buffett-led company or some other HEI that would believe that they have identified how and why NextEra went wrong, let's say, in trying to close the deal, that they would come up with a package, with an offer which would gain more public support, more legislative support, be more better, and then they would take their shot at trying to get the keys to the HEI kingdom. So, there's a lot of rap about how business unfriendly we are in Hawaii, but at the same time, it hasn't stopped. From what I understand, again, the rumor mill, a number of other parties chomping at the bit, kind of mixing my metaphors here, sharks circling in the water for their shot at the big chomp of Hawaiian Electric Industries.
Yeah, and I think, it would be good to have an infusion of capital. People have to realize that buying the stock, such as NextEra proposed to do, does not mean per se that, it would invest capital. But it has said it would invest capital as the new stockholder. And that's what you expect from a company or a consortium that buys the stock of a utility, that not only will they spend the money to buy the stock, but they will also invest capital, like for the, the grid that we see and want, and we've been talking about for years, but we don't have yet. And they say $350 million, that's got to come from somewhere. So a new buyer would be the source of funds, or at least part of those funds. And, it sounds to me like, this company, Hawaiian Electric, is on the market. These things do not happen by accident. Warren Buffett does not happen by accident. It may well be that he's been circling this and waiting to see what happens in the PUC. On the question of whether he will have an easier time of it, jury's out on that,
Well, and I mean, the reality is such that the bar for the takeover of a company like HEI is very high and quite onerous. And what I'm referring to specifically is the requirement that there are 75% of the shareholders, or 75% of the owners, 75% of the total shares, outstanding 100+ million shares of HEI, that they have to vote in favor of such a transaction. And I'll remind you that HEI needed to extend the vote by 30 days from May until June of last year in order to just squeak over the bar of 75% shareholder approval. So that has got to give many cause for pause. And I mean, I got to believe that with my friends at HECO and HEI over the past 2 years, that there's now a substantial amount of, shall we say, merger fatigue. So to what extent they would be interested in starting that carousel up again, I have no inside information on that, but I do intuit that there is, oh Lordy, this has gone on for a very, very long time. We just want it to end one way or the other, because we got a lot of business to do, a lot of things to change. And you talk about a big company bringing in capital. Well, that's true, but the bottom line is that if 200 million is needed, 400 million, or however many you want to come up with, I mean, it's going to be paid by the ratepayers. And the question is, how easy can the company, whether it's HECO, whether it's HEI, how easy can they get access to money, number one, and number two, what the cost of that money is going to be, because ultimately it will be paid back through the ratepayers. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if NextEra is not there with their substantial depth of balance sheet and their wonderful credit rating, that doesn't mean the end of the world by any means in terms of Hawaiian Electric doing what they need to do. And they were questioned on that repeatedly in the course of the evidentiary hearings, and the response was very consistent, is that they have the wherewithal to do what needs to be done. It doesn't collapse like a sandcastle getting hit by a wave, that the HEI business model or the HEI companies, the HECO companies, somehow are in grave danger if NextEra goes away. That's simply not the case.
No, but the Clean Energy Initiative has to go forward. We have to start moving. It's been held up, in my view, for 18 months while this has, been over our heads. And I agree with your statement, and I think it's really the final statement of this discussion to say, one way or the other, let's have a decision. Let's move on. Let's get out from under the cloud. Thank you, Marco Mangelsdorf, ProVision Solar, joining us by Skype audio from, well, San Francisco, I guess. Here on Marco, Mina, and me, mostly Marco and me today, talking about the only issue that's really on the table for now, and hoping that it will be resolved soon. Aloha, Marco.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Dave. Till the next time.